There's a moment, a pause, a heartbeat between accusation and reaction. And in that space, most people collapse. They rush to defend themselves, to clarify, to explain, "I didn't mean it, you misunderstood me, that's not who I am." But here's the brutal truth. The second you defend yourself, you lose. Not because you're wrong, but because now everyone sees you as someone who needs to explain. Machiavelli understood this before anyone. That power isn't about being right. It's about being unreachable. Because when you defend yourself, you say without saying it, "You have the right to judge me." And once they have that, they own the frame. People don't listen to your defense. They watch your reaction. They don't see logic, they see tension. And if you flinch, if you try to fix their perception, they smell blood. But the one who stays calm, who lets the accusation float, who holds still while the world spins, that person becomes untouchable. Not because they explain themselves, but because they didn't need to. The lesson starts now. You've been taught to speak up when you're misunderstood, to explain when someone misjudges you, to defend your character, like it's a noble act. But what if I told you that every time you justify yourself, you lose a little more power? The hidden cost of defending yourself isn't just pride, it's position. Because the moment you start explaining, you step onto their stage. You speak in their frame. And once you're in their frame, you've already lost the game. When someone accuses you, subtly or directly, they're not looking for truth. They're looking to control the narrative. And when you react, when you correct, when you plead, you're not clearing your name. You're confirming their authority to name you. Think about it. If someone says, "You're arrogant," and you instantly say, "No, I'm not," what just happened? You didn't win. You agreed that their opinion matters. You agreed that you need them to see you differently. And Machiavelli would smile, because you just bent the knee. Most people defend because they're afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of losing their image, afraid of looking like the villain. But here's the truth no one dares say. Power doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being unreadable. You want to be seen as innocent, but innocence is weak in the court of perception. Because the innocent beg, they plead, they panic. But the powerful, they remain still because they know something the crowd doesn't. The crowd doesn't judge based on facts. They judge based on who looks like they're in control. And here's where it gets dark. Even when you're right, even when you're the victim, defending yourself still makes you look guilty. Why? Because only the weak rush to explain. The strong, they let silence burn. They watch the accuser reach, stretch, spiral. They let the accusation float, unanswered. Not because they can't fight back, but because they choose not to. This silence isn't passivity in its positioning. Because in power games, mystery outplays explanation. Stillness beats scrambling. And presence outranks proof. You see, every time you defend yourself, you're chasing something you'll never catch: approval. And people can smell that chase. They can see the neediness behind the smile. And the need to be seen as good is the quickest way to look weak. The Machiavellian doesn't need approval. He understands something deeper. People don't respect what they understand. They respect what confuses them, what unsettles them, what makes them question themselves. And this is the lesson most people never learn. Power doesn't come from being clear. It comes from being consequential, from creating the feeling that your silence means something, that your calm hides something, that your restraint could end if you wanted it to. The man who explains too much looks guilty. The man who explains nothing makes others nervous. And the nervous mind starts to imagine stories, most of which are far more powerful than the truth ever was. Think back. The people you admired most, were they loud? Defensive? No, they were the ones who didn't flinch when challenged. They were the ones who didn't even acknowledge the insult, because they didn't see it as worthy of reaction. And that is what made them dangerous. So the next time someone questions your motives, your values, your reputation, don't explain, don't clarify, don't react, just wait. Let the silence do the talking. Because what you don't say will echo louder than anything you could have said. The cost of defending yourself is the loss of your mystery. And in a world built on perception, mystery is everything. Every conflict, every accusation, every subtle jab is really about one thing: framing. The frame determines who is seen as dominant, who is on trial, and who walks away with their image untouched. Most people walk straight into the trap. They argue within the terms their opponent sets. They try to win a game that was rigged the moment they accepted the rules. But Machiavelli knew the game isn't about truth. It's about who controls the spotlight, who controls the frame. When someone accuses you, most people think the right move is to respond quickly, clarify their stance, fix the misunderstanding. But here's the truth. He who responds first often loses control of the narrative. Because the second you reply, you accept their premise. You step into their emotional field. You say without saying it, yes, your judgment of me matters. Yes, I need to prove myself. And that's when the shift happens. You're no longer the actor, you're the defendant. And even if you win the argument, you've already lost something more important: authority. Now, contrast that with the Machiavellian. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't respond on cue. He watches. He waits. He lets the silence grow heavy. Why? Because silence is not the absence of a reaction. It is a deliberate inversion of power. The room shifts. The accuser grows uncertain. Others begin to question, why isn't he reacting? Is he above this? Does he know something we don't? And in that vacuum of certainty, you gain the most powerful leverage in social interaction. They start to fill in the blanks with strength, but it doesn't end with silence. The real mastery lies in the mirror. When attacked, the Machiavellian doesn't defend, he reflects. Someone says, "You're arrogant." He responds not with denial, but with detachment. Strange how confidence makes people uncomfortable. Strange how confidence makes people uncomfortable. Someone says, "You're manipulative." He doesn't explain. He tilts his head and replies, "Only those who can't be influenced say that." In that instant, the accusation flips back on the accuser. Suddenly, their words say more about their own insecurity than your character. This is frame inversion. It's not just staying calm, it's turning their emotional energy against them. This move terrifies people because they came for a fight and instead they find a mirror. Their jab is exposed for what it is: emotional projection. And now the attention shifts, not to your guilt, but to their intent. Why are they so bothered? Why are they pushing so hard for a reaction? Why does your stillness disturb them? The crowd begins to reevaluate. You are no longer on trial, they are. You see, most people want to be understood. They want to be seen as good, well-meaning, fair. But wanting to be understood is a weakness when you're in a power game. Because that desire gives others leverage. They can threaten to misunderstand you, and you'll chase them to correct it. But the Machiavellian doesn't chase understanding. He commands presence. His power doesn't come from people liking him. It comes from people watching him and wondering what he's thinking, what he'll do next, how far he's willing to go. And that unspoken unpredictability, that's what makes people cautious. That's what builds aura. You flip the power when you flip the script. You don't fight the accusation. You reveal the emotion behind it. You make it visible. You frame it not as truth, but as tension. And the minute that's clear to everyone else, the person who came at you suddenly looks unstable, insecure, obsessed, while you, the one who said almost nothing, look like the only person in the room with control. That's the difference between reacting and reframing. One makes you look desperate, the other makes you look dangerous. This strategy isn't cold, it's precise. Because if you can stay calm under attack, if you can resist the urge to explain yourself, if you can reframe the accusation instead of playing defense, then you've mastered something deeper than conversation. You've mastered emotional tempo. And whoever controls the tempo controls the frame. They decide the rhythm. They decide when it ends. And often, they walk out without ever having to speak more than a sentence. That's the power Machiavelli understood. It's not about having the right answers. It's about refusing to play by someone else's questions. Flip the frame, and you flip the room. Control the frame, and you own the outcome. There's a level of power that doesn't shout, doesn't explain, doesn't react, because it doesn't need to. It's the kind of power that enters a room and shifts the emotional temperature without saying a word. And most people never reach it because they never understand this. Silence isn't the absence of response. It's the presence of authority. When the average person is insulted, challenged, or accused, they scramble to repair the damage. They speak. They explain. They try to soften the blow. But the moment they do, they reveal something critical. They're bothered. And once people know you're bothered, once they know you need the room to see you a certain way, you lose the upper hand. Because now they know exactly where to press. But the Machiavellian isn't reactive. He's deliberate. He doesn't just stay silent. He lets silence do the speaking. When someone throws a jab, sarcastic, subtle, or sharp, he doesn't respond. He lets the words hang in the air, untouched. He holds still. No tension, no eye twitch, no nervous smile. Just total composure. And in that stillness, something strange happens. The attacker starts to squirm. Why? Because silence puts pressure back on the speaker. It makes the room wonder. It creates uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. Now the one who spoke is left hanging, unsure if they landed a hit, unsure if they overstepped, unsure if everyone else is watching them now. What they wanted was control. What they got was exposure. You see, the power of silence isn't just in what it avoids, it's in what it triggers. When people don't know what you're thinking, they fill in the blanks. And their mind, desperate for certainty, will often assign you more strength, more mystery, more danger than you actually possess. Because a man who says nothing, yet remains unmoved, is terrifying. It suggests he knows something you don't, that he sees through the moment, that he's playing a deeper game. This is the difference between strength and aura. Strength can be challenged, aura can't even be touched. Strength may lift its voice to correct, aura never needs to. Strength tries to change the narrative, aura makes the narrative irrelevant. The most powerful figures in history, in business, in social dynamics, they all share this trait. The ability to hold still while the world tries to provoke them. And this stillness, this psychological silence, is not passivity. It's mastery. It's control over your own nervous system. It's the refusal to let anyone else decide your emotional rhythm. When someone tries to bait you into explaining yourself, into reacting, into becoming smaller just to be understood, and you don't take the bait, you prove something far more important than your innocence. You prove your sovereignty. In personal relationships, this is devastatingly effective. When someone says, "You don't care about me," or "You're selfish," the average person rushes to convince, reassure, explain. But the Machiavellian doesn't play that emotional game. He lets the weight of the accusation echo and then calmly, evenly replies, "That's not how I see it." That one line, without tension, without panic, without apology, it does something profound. It forces the accuser to sit in their own emotion. It makes them reflect. And more often than not, they start questioning their tone, their words, their intent. That's what happens when you master psychological stillness. People stop arguing with you because they start arguing with themselves. And once they're talking to themselves, once their energy is turned inward, you've already won. Not by overpowering, not by out-talking, but by simply being the one person in the room they couldn't move. True silence isn't quiet. It's undisturbed presence. It says, I'm not hiding, I'm just not concerned. And that unbothered energy makes you the axis of the room, the one others orbit, the one no one wants to provoke without thinking twice. That's aura. And you don't build it by talking more. You build it by learning how not to react. When your ego is poked, when your name is questioned, when your image is challenged. Because once you train yourself to hold still when others lash out, once you develop the restraint to pause when your instincts scream to correct, once you master the art of letting silence burn through the noise, then your presence becomes power. And power, once silent and still, becomes unshakable. Most people see accusations as attacks. They feel the sting of judgment and move into defense mode, thinking if they just explain themselves clearly enough, the damage will go away. But the Machiavellian sees something different. He sees every accusation as an opportunity, a weapon left on the battlefield by an enemy too emotional to wield it wisely. And the real tactician doesn't dodge it. He picks it up and uses it against them. Here's what no one teaches you. You don't defeat the accusation by denying it. You defeat it by flipping it. You invert its emotional charge and make it reflect the insecurity of the one who spoke it. Because once they realize the spotlight is turned on them, they're the ones being watched, being judged, being exposed. They unravel. Someone calls you arrogant, most people would say, I'm not arrogant, I'm confident. But that's still a defense. It's still reactive. It still shows concern for the opinion of the accuser. The Machiavellian, he leans in slightly, raises an eyebrow and replies, strange how confidence makes some people uncomfortable. It's not a denial, it's a psychological counterstrike. It reframes the insult as a sign of their weakness, not yours. Now the accuser doesn't look righteous, they look insecure. And more importantly, they look small. Because the second you reframe the accusation as their emotional issue, the room begins to see them not as a truth teller, but as someone who couldn't handle your presence. You don't need to be defensive when you're the one setting the emotional context. That's the essence of weaponizing an accusation. It's not about proving the claim wrong, it's about making the accusation itself look foolish. And when done right, the accuser feels the need to defend themselves from their own attack. Someone calls you manipulative? Don't argue, just say, only people who can't be influenced say that. It's short, it's calm, and it's devastating. It doesn't give them more to bite. It ends the exchange while flipping the emotional spotlight onto them. They now have to explain why they think they're immune to influence and why they feel so threatened by yours. Or someone says, you're fake. Instead of trying to prove authenticity, the Machiavellian replies, everyone says that when they stop getting what they want. That single sentence kills the attack in midair. It implies their comment is coming from bitterness, not observation. And once bitterness is exposed, it's not brute force, it's redirection. You're using their energy, their aggression, their assumptions against them. And you do it without raising your voice, without breaking your calm, without even needing to raise your pulse. Understand this, in the court of public perception, your words are not judged by logic, they're judged by presence. The one who looks calm, in control, unbothered, wins. And when you flip an accusation into a comment on the other person's state of mind, you establish yourself as the one who is emotionally superior. That's social gravity. That's how reputations shift. without needing to argue or explain. Here's the part most people miss. Once you master this, you no longer fear being called arrogant, fake, manipulative, cold, or ruthless. In fact, you welcome it, because you've trained yourself to see those moments not as threats, but as openings. Each insult is a mirror they accidentally held up to their own weakness, and all you have to do is let the crowd see it. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't to destroy the accusation, it's to let it hang, just long enough for everyone to see how empty it truly is. When someone lashes out and you remain silent, composed, or reply with surgical precision, the room no longer watches the words, they watch the energy. And energy doesn't lie. You become untouchable, not because you fight back, but because you make your enemies collapse under the weight of their own emotional exposure. And you do it by making them explain themselves. That's the flip. You were accused, now they're on trial. The Machiavellian doesn't aim to be cleared, he aims to be confusing, because when people are confused by your reaction, when they can't tell what you're thinking or why you didn't flinch, they start assuming. And their assumptions, more often than not, are far more powerful than anything you could have said. Weaponize the accusation. Let it reveal more about them than it ever could about you. Because the one who holds their ground without defense is the one who forces the world to come to their defense instead. There's a point where words become unnecessary, where you've said so little, moved so rarely, explained so infrequently, that your silence is no longer seen as absence, it's seen as proof. Your stillness, once misinterpreted as detachment, is now feared as intent. That's when something rare happens. Your existence becomes the defense. At this level, you no longer need to respond to attacks, because your reputation walks ahead of you. Not a good reputation, those are fragile, built on the shifting sands of popularity and approval. No, what you've built is something harder, heavier, a strong reputation, one that doesn't rely on being liked, but on being respected. Or better yet, feared. Because when your presence carries power, accusations don't stick, they evaporate. People don't dare escalate. Not because you've proven yourself innocent, but because your silence says, I don't need to. And that rattles people more than any defense ever could. Because silence from the weak feels like shame, but silence from the strong, it feels like danger. At this stage, even your absence is a move. Even your stillness is an act of control. You no longer react to people, they react to you. They measure their words around you, they think twice before speaking your name, and if they ever try to accuse you publicly, they second guess it before the sentence is even finished. Why? Because you've trained them. You've conditioned the world to understand you are not someone to put on trial. And this doesn't come from pretending. It comes from discipline, from mastering your emotional rhythm so completely that others can't even find the pulse, from rejecting the game of approval so deeply that you become untouchable in it. People don't know what to do with someone who doesn't try to be understood. It disarms them, it disturbs them, and most of all, it rewires how they treat you. The misunderstood man is not weak, he's powerful, because his mystery creates myth. And myth, unlike facts, can't be debated. When people don't know what you'll say, what you think, what you feel, they project their fears onto you, and that projection becomes armor. Not because it protects you from being misunderstood, but because it makes people too uncertain to challenge you at all. Now here's the paradox. When you stop trying to defend your name, others start defending it for you. The crowd shifts. They say, he didn't even respond, and they're still attacking him. That was uncalled for. He doesn't deserve that. You didn't say a word, and yet you gained allies. Because people respect restraint more than resistance, and they instinctively move to protect what feels still, composed, unmoved. That's leverage. That's Machiavellian alchemy. So what do you do with this power? You hold it, quietly, patiently. You don't flaunt it. You don't weaponize it without purpose. You simply exist in it. And over time, people stop viewing you as someone who needs a defense. They start seeing you as a presence that defines the room. You shift from person to principle, from voice to force, from reactive to inevitable. Understand this clearly. You will never control what people say about you, but you can control whether it matters. And when your identity becomes so grounded, so solid, so sovereign, that it doesn't even flinch under pressure, that's when you stop living in defense and start living in definition. From that point forward, you don't chase clarity, you become clarity. You don't seek validation, you embody value. You don't fight rumors, you outlast them. Because your image is not what they think, it's what they fear you could do if you ever decided to care. And that silence, held with precision, becomes the most undeniable power of all. So now you know, the real power was never in defending yourself. It was in becoming someone who doesn't need to. Because the world won't always be fair. People will misunderstand you, mislabel you, underestimate you. And most of them are hoping you'll waste your energy trying to prove them wrong. But the one who rises in silence, the one who holds still when provoked, the one who lets accusations echo into nothing, that person commands a kind of power that can't be argued with, only felt. You don't need louder words, you need deeper presence. And once you learn to hold your ground, to speak only when it shifts the room, to be misunderstood without flinching, you become untouchable. That's not just strength, that's sovereignty. And in a world that's obsessed with being seen, you become unforgettable. Now, if this resonated with you, if it made you think differently, breathe slower, sit taller, you're ready for more. Subscribe to Inner Alchemy, where ancient wisdom meets modern mastery, where we don't chase validation, we cultivate presence. Hit the bell to unlock the next layer of mental power. Drop a comment with one lesson that hit the deepest, and share this with someone who's always defending themselves. Because the truth is, they need to hear this more than anyone. Don't explain yourself. Let the world feel you instead.